This call is now being recorded.
Okay, great.
This call is now taking notes.
So do we have any question from the last class? Any question from the last class? Or from the last classes? Any question? From the last classes? Okay, so let's just go on since we don't have any question. So Elsie, tell us, what was your take home in the last class?
I was absent too.
That's a
red flag.
That's a good one.
Not good enough. I'm sorry.
Not a red flag. Not a red flag. So let's have Shaliwa. Shaliwa, what was your take home in the last class?
Hello. I was not here. I was absent.
Oh, you were absent too. Busayo, more. Tell us, what was your take home in the last class? Oh, Busayo was absent too.
No, I was present, just that can't remember the specifics. I even read a portion out. I remember reading, there was this part I read out for the class, but
Yeah, we looked at risk management. We looked at the whole of clause 6. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So let me just go straight because I want to practicalize risk management to us, and then I want us to also look at document management. I don't know if you can cover clause 9 today. If not, we'll do clause 9 and 10 tomorrow, and then we'll touch some of the annex control, and we should close the training and on to the next one. Okay. So let me go straight into the risk assessment. So we looked at clause 6. We looked at planning, actions to address risk and opportunities. We looked at clause 6.1.1, 6.1.2, risk assessment and risk treatment. Right. And then we looked at information security objectives. So I just want to quickly take us through what risk assessment looks like in the ISO 27001. So let's practicalize. Let's look at some assets and let we carry out an assessment on them. Right. So this process is not rigid. This is just for educational purpose. So it means this is not like what you are going to see. There are things that you will see by default in any risk assessment, whether it is enterprise assessment or it's information security, or you are focused on liquidity, whatever risk assessment, there are criteria that you must see. And then we have some of them here. Things like threat, vulnerability, risk owner, existing control, likelihood, impact, risk score, risk level, treatment option. These things must be there, irrespective of the kind of assessments that you are carrying out. They have to be there. So, and then if you remember what we looked at in the last class, we said risk assessment starts from risk identification. Identification of your asset, identification of your threats, identification of vulnerabilities, identification of risk owners, identification of existing controls, identification of likelihood and impact. Right. So, and all of these things are also documented within the standard clause 6.1.2, 6.1.3 already define how you should carry out an assessment. Now, this is now the implementation of that process of the clause 6.1.2. What the process asks you to do, this is the implementation of that process. So I've brought out some examples, some assets, right, that we can use when you want to carry out risk assessment, especially when it is information security management system. In most cases, they are asset based. They are asset based, and the fact that they are asset based, it helps you to identify each of the assets within the organization, and then to be able to carry out an assessment of risk on all of those assets. Now, let's say, for example, we have identified various assets within a particular organization, and then we have itemized those assets. The fact that I have 3 assets here does not mean you can only carry out an assessment on 3. This is just to educate us, because I'm not able to list out all of the assets that a particular organization has. It depends on the organization's context. And another organization may not have a CFO. It's possible they don't have a CFO. Maybe it is the CEO managing the role of the CFO and the CEO. In this case, it will be the CEO, and then you will carry out a risk that is applicable to a CFO to the CEO. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I have a CFO. This is the assumption that the organization that you are taking the asset from has a chief financial officer. But let's say it's an organization that do not have a chief financial officer. You do not necessarily need to document a CFO there, because it is not part of the assets. So let's not assume that that company, it is the CEO that manages the process of the CFO. What you will do in that regard is to then document the CEO as the asset, then carry out an assessment on the CEO based on the function of the CEO, because the CEO is one managing. The CEO is one managing managing finances, and also managing the process of the CEO within the organization. I hope that's clear. Now, we have itemized 3 assets here within this risk assessment, just to educate us. And then we are going to look at various treatment options also. Okay, Bukumi says she does not understand. Okay, so what I'm saying is, in ISO 27001, in most cases, it is asset-based. You must have identified all of the assets within the organization. Now, the list that we have here is because I am making an assumption. Okay, let me use an instance. Alonge Peter's company has laptops, they have air conditioner that is IoT enabled, and they have a CFO in their company. So that is why you are seeing all of these assets here, because they belong to Alonge's company, and because I'm carrying out a risk assessment on Alonge's company. Now, let's say Daniel's company do not have a CFO. They don't have a CFO. So, but they have a CEO. The CEO is the one managing the role, especially for companies that are new in the business. So they have a CEO, but the CEO is the one managing the role of the CFO. In that case, instead of carrying out a threat of fraud, because in most cases, the person that is susceptible to fraud in an organization is the CFO. But because the other person's company do not have a CFO, but they have a CEO managing the role of finances, in this case, it will be the CEO, and we can still carry out an assessment on the CEO. The threat, you can identify a threat called fraud on the CEO, because the CEO manages that process. So what I'm trying to say is that it is not generic, that you will now say, okay, for every risk assessment that you want to carry for every company, you will just list CEO, CFO, CRO, blah, blah, blah. No, it must be based on the assets that is identified within that organization. Bukumi, does that make sense to you?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
That yes, sir, it's not sounding. Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay, great. Now, let's carry out sample assessments. Laptop, we have identified laptop and desktop as an asset. Why did we merge laptops and desktops together? Because it is not practicable that you should carry out an assessment on laptop 1, laptop 2, Laptop 3. Let's say a company that has 1,000 staff and all of the 1,000 staff has laptop. Are you going to carry out risk assessment on laptop 1, laptop 2, laptop 3? No, you are going to waste a lot of time and you will not finish the assessment and the document will just be bulky and it will not make sense. But there are some specific assets that you can match together. Why? Because they have similar traits and similar risks. And that desktop also sits in the domain of a laptop. So the threat applicable to a laptop is also applicable to a desktop. Do you understand? Also, there are some assets that they may have the same name, but you may not treat them the same. For instance, servers. There can be servers that are very, very critical to the organization, and then there can be servers that are less critical to the organization. So the assessment you are going to carry out on a critical server will be different from the assessment you are going to carry out on less critical server. However, if you merge a critical and a less critical server together, by the time you are carrying out an assessment, ensure that you are carrying out the assessment as if every of the servers are critical. That is another typical example. Another example is applications. The threat applicable to a mobile application is different from the threat applicable to a web application. So when you are carrying out a risk assessment, do not just say you are carrying out assessment on applications. No, the applications that are off the shelf, the applications that are built internally, there are threats that are different to them. For instance, applications that are off the shelf, threats like maybe tamper of code within the source code, right? Maybe tamper of phone within the tamper of code within the source code may not be applicable because you bought it, it's off the shelf. For instance, Gmail. Tampering of code is not applicable, it does not concern you. But if it's an application that is built internally, it is a different ball game. Somebody can tamper with the source code. So you need to be able to identify assets that you can match together and carry out an assessment, and assets that you can separate without carrying out, that you can separate, that you should not merge together. So Elsie said, if you have a company phone, is that part of laptop and desktop? Yes, you can merge company phone to laptop and desktop. They have almost applicable threats that you can merge together, right? So we have laptop and desktop. So let's start with laptop and desktop, right? Which is the asset. Applicable threats to this laptop and desktop, we have identified virus. We have identified virus. Hold on, I'm trying to put this in full screen. Okay, great. We have identified a virus. Now, because I have just one threat here, does not mean only one threat is applicable to these assets called laptops and desktop. And please do not make a mistake of merging all the threads inside one column. Let me give you a typical example. Let me show you what I'm trying to say. For instance, let me ask someone. Let's see. Sadiq Badmos. Which other threat do you think is applicable to laptop and desktop?
Theft.
Theft, very good. Now, you are not going to come here and say number 2, theft. Why? Because by the time you identify these two threats together within a column, the likelihood that virus will occur on a laptop is different from the likelihood that the laptop will be stolen. Very different. The impact if there is a virus on a laptop is different from the impact if there is theft on the laptop. For instance, if there's virus on the laptop, you can quarantine the system or maybe change the hard drive. The hard drive gets damaged. But if there is theft, you know that one, you don't even have access to the system again. So because the likelihood is different, you will not be able to merge threats like this on a single asset. And these are the things that you need to identify and note as an implementer if you do not want to make mistake in risk assessment. These are some common mistakes in risk management within an organization. Now, what do you do in cases like this? What do? You can have another colon here. Bring this as theft. Do you see? You can merge this asset part together because you are still speaking to the same asset. And if you have something like this, it will help to be able to identify the vulnerabilities applicable to the theft, because the vulnerability applicable to virus is different from the vulnerability applicable to theft. The risk owner will be the same in some cases. The existing control to virus will be different in some cases to existing control to theft. And you can see that you can now identify the likelihood of occurrence of theft and the impact if that risk were to materialize. Even though you are still speaking to the same assets. So you see, this is how to carry out a proper risk assessment. Now, that is just to open our eyes to something. So this threat that we have identified here is virus. What are the vulnerabilities to the threat of virus? Now, remember when we were looking at risk management also, there must be a relationship between the threat and vulnerability. Threat cannot be virus, and vulnerability is a lack of physical monitoring. That does not make sense, because vulnerability is loss of data. In fact, loss of data in itself is a threat. Information loss is a big threat. It's not a vulnerability, because that is the impact already. Do you understand? So there must be a relationship between the threat and vulnerability. Now, phishing is a vulnerability. Phishing mail is a vulnerability, because if a phishing mail is sent to the organization and somebody clicks on that mail, it can introduce a virus within the system. Lack of antivirus also is a vulnerability that can be exploited by virus. Lack of awareness also, if people are not aware of the kind of softwares or the kind of things that they can click or install within the system, it can also cause a virus. Improper update of softwares also can cause a virus. If you do not update your applications, your software can cause a virus. Now, the risk owner, based on my assumption here, is the IT department. Why? Because the IT department are the one that manage this particular asset. The risk owner in most cases is the person that has the responsibility to be able to administer control to that asset. But however it is being called, this is not rigid. In some organization, the person that manages laptop and desktop can be the hardware manager. In some organization, it is the CTO. So however it is being called, you identify the risk owner. Once you identify the risk owner, you identify the existing control. Now, these existing controls are controls that are in place within the organization to mitigate the threat you have identified. Now, let's now say within the organization, the existing control we have is awareness. The only existing control we have, we don't carry out phishing simulation. We don't have an antivirus. We don't carry out proper update of software. We don't have a central tool that helps to automate and implement update of software. The only thing we have is awareness. So based on the existing control and based on lack of proper controls, especially preventive controls, we can say the likelihood of occurrence of this threat is 4. Looking at your classification, we did not just pick 4. There must have been a classification. You can see likelihood 4, say very likely. If your matrix is 3 by 3, you cannot have 4 here. If you're using a 3 by 3 matrix, you cannot have 4 here. It's not possible. It's because this is a 5 by 5 matrix. And then 4 says very likely, because the existing control and the threat we are looking at, it is likely that it will occur. And then if it occurs, the impact is high. The impact is high based on our classification also. And for those of us that did matrix in school, 4 by 4, 4 times 4 is 16. 16 falls in between this place. This is 4, very likely, and this is 4, I, which is impact. 16 falls in between this place. Now let's assume that 16 falls here. Let's assume that our risk appetite is medium. So that means our risk appetite is within 5 to, let's say, 12, right? Okay, this is 5, and this is 3. So 5 times 3 is 15 here. Right. So let's say it is within 5 to 12, medium. I is from 12 above up to 25, and then low is 1 to 4. Right. Yeah, low is 1 to 4, because if you multiply 1 by 4, this is the highest 4 here. You multiply 1 by 4, this is highest 4 here. That's low. And then our risk appetite, 4 times 4, based on our risk appetite is medium, which is between 5 to 12. But based on our assessment, likelihood is 4, impact is 4. If you multiply 4 by 4, it gives us 16, which is a high risk. In most cases, these things are automated. If you see that if I change this one to 1, it will change back to 4 and it will be low. If I change it back to 4, it will change to 16 and it will be high. It is most times it is automated. So by default, because this is a high risk that is above our risk appetite, by default, what do we do as an organization? We mitigate. That is to lessen the effect of that risk. Now, in terms of mitigation, what are the controls? Remember that we have an existing control in place called awareness. So what additional controls can we now put in place to mitigate this risk of virus, this threats, looking at the vulnerabilities that we have in place? Number 1, phishing simulation. Number 2, anti-malware, having an anti-malware solution in place or an antivirus solution in place. Number 3, proper update of softwares, maybe having a centralized tool to push it. And then you look at the proper annex controls that are able to you're able to mark with the control you have identified. 6.3 is talking about information security awareness, education, and training, which phishing simulation is part of it. 8.7 is talking about anti-malware. 8.19 is talking about installation of software. 8.1 is talking about user endpoint devices, which is what we are talking about, laptops and desktops. And these are the control requirements. These are the things that they talk about in the annex control. And then you can have this. Some companies do not have this in the document, linked to control documentation, blah, blah, blah. So once these controls are implemented, you now carry out what we call a post-treatment, what is like a revised assessment. So based on the new control you now have in place, the likelihood that this risk will occur, we are saying it is 2. If you look at likelihood, 2 means it is unlikely that there's a possibility that it could happen, but it probably won't because of the controls that we have in place. If it now happens, the impact has lessened from 4 to 3. The impact in this case is moderate. Even though it happened, it is moderate. We can still deliver our product and service. So if the likelihood is 2, which is here, which is unlikely, is 2, which is unlikely, and the impact is 4, which is high, 2 times 4, we will get 8. 8 falls in between here, which is within a just lost my connection. Can everyone see me?
We couldn't hear you before, but we can
Okay.
hear you now.
So you have mitigated from 16 up to 8. Okay, great. You have mitigated from 16 up to 8. Now, which means you have a residual risk of 8, and then you can choose to accept that risk as an organization. That is example of mitigating the risk. Another one is, let's say we have an asset that is an air conditioner, but this air conditioner is IoT enabled. It is connected to the network. And then, because it is connected to the network, there's every possibility that somebody can go through that air conditioner to get into the network, because the threat that is applicable is information loss. And the vulnerability is that the air conditioner is unsegregated. It's on an unsegregated network. So that means somebody can use that air conditioner to get through and move laterally within the network, within the organization. Also, we have weak network configuration as vulnerability, or visible network ports within the organization. People can just come to the company, especially when it's a big company, and they just plug a wireless cord, a Wi-Fi cord, right? RJ45, plug it into the port, and then walk into this, move into the network, because there are no segregation. So let's now assume that this is a new business. We do not have any control in place. What is the likelihood that this risk will occur? It is almost certain. Either it already happens regularly, or there's some reason to believe that it is imminent. What is the impact if it occurs? The impact is very high, because people will be able to get into our network, move things, do whatever they like. Now, based on our classification and the risk matrix, the likelihood is almost certain, and the impact is very high. 5 times 5 is 25. That is the highest level. And based on our sheets, we have 5 times 5 here, we have 25, which is high. But because we can now choose to even say, you know what, we don't want to use an air conditioner that is IoT enabled, that connects to the network. Let us get a traditional air conditioner. Let us avoid this risk. And then we eliminate that process of having an air conditioner. Even though this threat may still be applicable to other information or other network systems within the organization. That is risk avoidance. Now, another asset is CFO. Because remember that people are also part of the asset, and you will carry out a risk assessment on them. You cannot merge some people together. For instance, you can merge, you can, especially for C-level staff, you cannot merge CEO, CFO, CRO, maybe the board also, or chairman of the board. No, you have to carry out a separate risk assessment on this set of people. Software developers, who again, human resource person. These people, you must carry out a separate risk assessment on them. But you can now merge the rest of the staff, because maybe you assume that they have similar risk together. But there are some certain level of staff within the business that you must carry out risk assessment on them. So I've brought out CFO. The threat applicable to a CFO is fraud, because they are one that manages finance within the organization. So, and then you must ensure that you bring out appropriate threats that are reasonable, that are applicable to them. See, fraud is not really applicable to the CEO, even though the CEO supervises or supersedes every other person. But the CFO is more susceptible to fraud. The CTO is not. The CTO will be susceptible to configuration mismanagement, because he'll be the one to manage configuration within the organization, than fraud. In most cases, they do not even have touch point with money, except maybe they want to submit budgets for tools that they use within the organization. So we have identified fraud as a threat for the CFO. Now, what are the vulnerabilities? A sample example of the vulnerability identified is insufficient screening. Let's say you are bringing in a CFO within the company. You do not carry out background check whether the person has defrauded the company before, or the person is a fraud. Maybe it depends even on the watch list. Right. So let's say vulnerability is insufficient screening. Now, risk owner, the CEO. Why? Because the CEO is the one that manages the CFO. But in some cases, they both report to the board. But in most cases, the CFO reports to the CEO. So existing controls, let's now assume that this company, the existing control they have in place is that they carry out background verification. And then there is also an independent finance auditor like KPMG that comes to still audit the role of that CFO. So because of these good controls in place, preventive controls in place, the likelihood of occurrence of the risk is unlikely, which is 2. But if even though it happens, even though we have a control in place, the impact will be moderate on the business based on data and statistics. So if you multiply 2 by 3, what do you get? You get medium. And medium is within, you get 6, which is medium. And that is within our risk appetite. As an organization, we have the right to accept that risk. This is typical way on how to carry out risk assessment. Risk assessment. Do we have any question before we move on? Any question? Anything that needs clarification? Any question? If you are, yeah, I can share the document with us. If you are clear, give me a thumbs up. You are clear with what I just explained. Give me a thumbs up. Okay. I can only see 3 persons hand. Open our eyes to risk management. Now, from this place, this risk description, this identification, up to this place, this is where risk assessment ends. Then the rest of the part is where risk treatment starts. Then everything all together is what we call risk management. Everything all together is risk management, from identification to assessment to treatment. Is what we call risk management. Okay, so I'll stop sharing my screen, and then I'll use the material. I'll use the material to explain what's clause 7. So we are done with clause 6. We look at clause 7, and then tomorrow we'll look at clause 9 and 10, and probably touch the annex control, and then close the training. This guy has started again. Can you guys see him? Please, my system is misbehaving. Just give me some seconds. I think I need to shut down the system for like 1 full day. Hold on, please. Let me try to join on my phone first. Okay. Do you have anyone that has the standard? Let me, depending when the system comes up. Anyone with the standard I can share. Is anyone saying anything? Anyone with the standard I can share? I can share his or her screen. Pending, or just give me some minutes. Let me restart my system.
So is it the one of 26 pages or? Sir.
Yeah, it's 27,001 2022 standard. let me see if I can share from my phone, depending when my system comes up. Let's see. Oh, la. Ah, no, I don't have it here. Okay, Bukumi, can you share? Can you share for? Do you have it? Do you have it with you? Okay, I think somebody sent it to the group chats. Okay. This guy is up.
Yes, sir, there is one. That's what I was asking. If it's one of 26 pages, because I know that Robinson shared it to the group.
Yes, that's it.
Okay,
That's it.
okay.
Yeah, just open it and go to clause 7.
Okay, let me see.
Open it and go to clause 7. Okay. Have you started sharing the slide? Okay, great. All right. So let's look at clause 7. I will not spend too much time on some of the things. For instance, 7.1 resources. We've talked about resources, right? So this is basically saying we have identified context of the organization, clause 4. We have put leadership commitment in place, clause 5. We have planned for the ISMS, clause 6. Now we need to support the ISMS with some certain level of things that are needed. And one of them is clause 7.1 resources. So the standard says the organization shall determine and provide the resources needed for the establishment, implementation, maintenance, and continual improvement of information security management system. So what this is saying typically is that all of the resources that are needed, financial resources, people resources, people that should manage processes within the organization, resources in terms of awareness, in terms of presence of management, in terms of knowledge, right? In terms of availability, the standard is saying the business should ensure that they provide those resources to support the implementation of the information security management system, right? And part of supporting the ISO 27001 also is competence, because it is needed that people that will manage security processes are competent. And let me tell us a typical example that organizations they make in this clause 7.2. Most times they focus on people that are within the integrated management system, the IMS. I mean the information security management system, the ISMS. But the standard is not specific only to the ISMS. It says determine necessary competence of persons doing work under his control that affect the what information security performance. So the HR, how competent is the HR to manage people within the organization? The IT person, how competent is the person with appropriate education? When we say competence, we are talking about education, training, or experience. Because somebody that has read, because the person has done, and that is why a lot of business crumble. Because the person has MBA, has done this, but has never implemented, no experience. I think something happened also. I saw a tweet, somebody posted something that there is a McKinsey consultant that's always, talking about business growth, business experience, blah, blah, blah. And then a particular company, one of the big companies, employed that consultant to come and manage the business, and then the consultant ran down that company's finance. Why? Because the person has always been talking and never doing. So beyond education, competence also in terms of appropriate experience. So people that will manage information security rules, and that's why you see some organization, somebody is already a CISO. The person that does not have understanding of how processes work, how controls are implemented. Maybe the person was just part of the IT department growing up, and they just give the person CISO back, give the person title. No, is the person competent in respect to appropriate education, training, or experience? And then the people that are leading the information security management system, the lead implementers, are they competent? The person that will carry out the internal auditor. Now, I audited an organization. I audited a particular standard for them. We've audited them like about a month or 2 months ago. And then CBN was coming to audit them just 2 days ago. They reached out to us that they need our certificate to show competence, that we are competent enough to be able to carry out the audit that we did. So competence also on the basis of appropriate certification and experience and training. And then where applicable, because in some cases also, they may not be competent, but because you need somebody to fill the role. But where applicable, if they are filling the role without being competent, they must take action to acquire the necessary competence and evaluate the effectiveness. This evaluation is saying, beyond them just going to do the training and write exam, after they have done the training, how are they able to manage the process that they managed before? Is there like a post-evaluation of their competence? So there must be that evaluation. And then retain appropriate documented information. If I come to audit you as an auditor, the question I will ask you, when you tell me that yes, your staff are competent, let me see evidence of the training they did. Let me see evidence of the certification. If they are not competent, if you don't have documented evidence, then there's nothing you want, even though you are a pastor, there's nothing you want to tell me that I'll believe. Now that's about competence. 7.3 awareness. This one is straightforward. It's mentioned 3 things. So now businesses make mistake to think 7.3 is 6 annex 6.3 plus 7.3 awareness is different from annex 6.3 information security awareness, education and training. Plus 7.3 awareness is straightforward. They said they want the people that are working under the organization to be aware of just 3 things. Just 3 things in this clause 7.3. Number 1, information security policy. Your clause 5.2 talks about your information security policy. So 7.3 is saying they should be aware of that policy. Once they are aware of the policy in clause 5.2, then you are good to go. Number 2, that contribution to the effectiveness of the ISMS, there must be a communication to let them know that, see, you need to contribute positively to the ISMS. If you do not, there's a mistake, there's an issue. And then the benefits of improved information security performance, you also need to communicate to them. Let them know the benefits of having a good security performance within the organization. C says the implication. Now, if you do not contribute, there are implications of not conforming with the ISMS requirements. As an individual, there are implications of non-compliance. As a business entirely, there are implications of non-compliance to the information security management system. Once you do these 3, you have fulfilled the requirement of clause 7.3 and you are good to go. Clause 7.4, communication. Now, because you need to make communication, communicate ISMS policy, communicate process documents, communicate changes in systems, communicate this, communicate that there will be an audit. So because that communication is needed, an organization must have what we call a communication plan that will help them identify what to communicate. And this communication plan is not only focused on internal communication. Look at what the standard says. So the organization shall determine the need for internal and external, depending on the interested party, because you have to communicate with the external people, the public? How do you communicate your policy to the public? Maybe via your website. You have to document it within your plan. Your IMS policy, you communicate it via your website. How do you communicate to your internal staff? Let's say security awareness. We communicate every month via newsletter. You document it within your communication plan, so that you have a plan that you follow to identify the kind of communications you want to carry out, how frequent you want to carry those communications out, what you want to communicate, when you want to communicate it, the people you are communicating them to, and then how you want to communicate, make those communications. All right, I've switched back to my system. So that's on clause 7.4, communication. It's talking about how you communicate make communications within your information security management system. Let me see. This is interesting. Okay, let me present. Please confirm you can see my screen. Confirm you can see my screen. Okay, great. Now let's go to clause 7.5, the last subclause under clause 7. So what 7.5 basically is talking about is documented information. Everything that we are talking about in the ISMS, you must document them. Your policy, how do you show auditor? How do you even communicate your policy to your staff? How do they know the intent of management? It must be documented. Right? Your processes, the technologies you use, how you manage things, how you learn from things. The risk assessment that I just showed you is documented information. The IMS policy on the website is the documented information. Incident management policy on your tool is documented information. So this documented information must be available to the extent that it is practicable within the organization. Even though the documented information will differ depending on the organization. For instance, if a company do not have a physical location, Annex 7 that talks about physical security will not be applicable to them. And that means they will not have a physical security policy because it is not applicable. So documented information will only be applicable based on the organization and the competence of the person that is managing the information security management system. So, and then when creating documents, ensure that they are well described, they are well identified. The format is uniform. You are using a uniform font size, uniform font style, right? The graphics is good. It is legible, right? It is well identified. And then there is a procedure to review them, to also approve them before people start using them, before you start communicating to people. And then they have to be appropriately controlled, right? Where they need to be available where it is needed and when it is needed. And then they have to be adequately protected from loss of confidentiality, integrity, and even availability when it is a physical documentation, or even when it's a logical document. Let's say it's an e-document, right? You need to be able to protect the availability also of that document. And that's typically what clause 7.5 documented information is talking about. Clause 8 basically is telling us, clause 8.1 operation is telling us everything that you have stated, all the processes you have identified in your ISMS, they must be implemented. It is reminding us, that's what 8.1 is telling us. 8.2 is reminding us to implement what we have stated that we will do in clause 6.1.2. That's risk assessment. Your risk assessment process, look at what it says. 8.2 says the organization shall perform information security risk assessment at planned intervals or when significant changes occur. So it is saying you can say you want to do risk assessments annually, but there is a significant change within the year. It means you must do the risk assessment. You must carry out that risk assessment. So it's reminding you to ensure that you retain documented information for the risk assessment. The same thing with 8.3, reminding us to ensure that we carry out risk assessment and ensure that we implement the risk treatment rather, ensure that we implement the risk treatment plan. And that takes us to the end of the trying to that is the end of the clause 7 support and clause 8 operation of the information security management system. Tomorrow we'll look at clause 9 and clause 10, performance evaluation and improvements. And then we'll look at, if you have time, we'll look at the annex controls, and then we close the training proper. Right. Do you have any question? Any question before we go to other business? Any questions so far? Any question? If you are clear with today's training, please give a thumbs up. Okay. Okay. All right. I'll stop sharing my screen. Okay. Since we don't have any question, we'll just go to the business of the day. And that is for those that are part of the 33 initiative, that is to announce the people that we have selected for the professional, to write the professional exam. We selected 3 persons based on documented criteria for the information security management system exam. And she will call out their names. We are going to register you to write the exam next week, Friday. So we open up the mock exam for you to keep trying and then ensure that you get better with it before you write the exam next week, Friday. Right. So Shei, we give you the floor. So wonderfully, we have Shei in the house. She came to celebrate me yesterday, and she's in the house. So she's going to tell us the people that we have selected, and then also talk about the criteria that we used in selecting. Shei, you have your face and your voice.
Good evening, everyone. How are you doing? I want responses. Unmute and speak.
Hello, Shay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chase. How are you doing?
Good evening, Shay.
I'm fine. How
Our heart is
about
going
you?
big.
I'm okay.
I don't get Peter. I want to hear your voice. Hi, Peter. Good evening. Unmute and speak. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
You were so serious the last time I saw your face. Okay, so welcome everyone. I don't want to bore us too much with unnecessary talk, so let's just go straight to business. Okay, so some of the things we looked at was attendance, participation, and of course the test score. So we'll be selecting. We've selected 3 persons. We have someone who has automatic selection, and the last 2 was picked based on attendance, the test score. So we have a lot of persons who have high attendance anyways. But then the test score was another major criteria. Okay, so for the first two persons, we have the total score was 220, and we have so many persons have lesser number. I know we're so serious that day, probably because of the tension or maybe the network. I know it's the questions are very simple, right? But then where that exam tension and everybody trying to be to do their best, but then we're not sure. But we have about 5 persons have lesser than 100. Then we have about 6 persons have about 110. Then we have only 2. We have 2. We have a tie, and we tried to break the tie, but then we could not because both of them have 2 attendance rates. I mean, the same attendance score as well. So the first person is Stephen Etugo. He has the highest score. Please, a round of applause for him. I want that digital clap. Yeah, clap, 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 clap. It's not easy. Then the second one is Miracle. Okay.
Wow.
I don't know if I pronounce your name correctly. Yes, celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. Then our automatic baby is Bukumi Mary. Our criteria was based on attendance. I mean, she was chosen from the very first day we started the training. She was the first person who joined, and from all the trainings, she has been participating actively. So that was how we chose her. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining the section. Kenny will go ahead and book the exam for you guys. Congratulations to everyone. And for those who did not win, there are always opportunities coming our way. So let's try as much as possible to put our best into everything we do. Thank you. Kenny, over to you.
All right, everyone. I hope we've tried our best to. I want to hear us speak. I hope we've tried our best to select, like we've been fair in selection, right? However, because we have also identified that there will be a set of people that would want to write the exam. Right? The exam typically is 550,000 naira. That is how it is being charged. However, if you want to write the exam, we are going to offset some payments. So the team will offset 200K, and then you can make a payment of 350,000 naira if you are interested in writing the exam. That is for this batch. Sorry. Sorry. So if you're interested in writing, you are not selected as part of the 3. You're interested in writing, you can reach out to either Olaide or reach out to Shei on the group, and then we'll book you for the exam. So take off 200,000, we'll make that payment on our end, and then you can pay 350,000, and then we can book you for the exam. What I can assure you is that there are more opportunities coming. There are more opportunities coming. If you followed my status yesterday, we unveiled an office, which is the office of Cyber Cadabra, which will have its own branding and then has its own push. We are going to also send out we'll send out a link for people to register if you want to be part of our mailing list. So whenever we have opportunities, what we want to focus on will be trade of opportunities to bring something like things like this. See how we can get from, we want to be cybersecurity Robin Hood. so that we'll see how we can get from maybe the government or from people that can sponsor initiatives like this, and then see how we can bring it down, and then for people that need it, and then support people to grow within this space. As we all grow, also we become alumni, and then we also find a way to give back. That is the give back to the community. That's the essence of this push. So I can assure us that there are enormous opportunities coming. And as I mentioned, we will be having audits projects coming up, implementation projects coming up, and we are not going to select the 3 people that we are giving the voucher for free. We are going to come to select different people from the group to join us to learn from it also. So this is how we are going to, this is how we plan to balance these things also. But as we go on, we'll take more decisions, see how we can, push out initiatives and programs like this also to everyone. So the training continues tomorrow. Please, because we have selected the best 3, does not mean we are only going to see 3 of them on the court tomorrow. The training continues tomorrow. Join the training. We'll look at performance evaluation and what's it called? Improvement tomorrow. We should be done by tomorrow, latest Monday. We should be done, and then others can write their exam. We also need you to just do a little task for us, right, which we are still going to communicate with you at a later time. Just do maybe a 3-minute video or a 2-minute video, just talking about how the program went and how impactful it was, and what you think can be done. We'll tell you, we'll give you a list of things you can talk about, and then you can say it in your own regard, right? So I'll upload the recording from tonight on the YouTube page, and then we'll continue from tomorrow. Congratulations to those that are selected, and then I wish us best of luck. Good night and bye, everyone.
Okay, good night. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kenny.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you.